Hello, I'm Patrick, a movable book collector from Paris. This was originally a video lecture for French audiences. I have decided to translate it to satisfy fans of movable books. Please excuse my pronunciation in advance, and I hope you will understand my words despite my French accent. So, I would like to take you on a journey into the world of movable books. We will be looking at different animation systems invented by artists and paper engineers, with occasional comparisons between the old and the new. People often ask me, what are movable books? Or how long have they been around? Some specialists believe that the Liber Floridus, kept at the University of Ghent in Belgium, was the first manuscript to use a system insofar as a simple folding is considered to be a system. As far as I am concerned, it's simply a trick by its author, Lambert de Saint-Omer, to give more space to his oversized circle and add more text. But it was in the 13th century that we really began to see what was animated in a book. The English Benedictine monk Matthew Paris is thought to have been the first person to use a cut-out paper disc in his manuscript Chronica Majora, here from the Parker Library at Cambridge University. Since handwritten books were very heavy, Paris considered it more ingenious to be able to turn a cut-out circular dial attached to the book instead of turning the whole book each time. This is how the Volvelle came into being, from the Latin volvere, meaning to turn around. For more than 2 centuries, the Volvelle, an independent paper disc turning around a central axis, was the main system used in manuscripts and printed books, along with folds and flaps. Jacques Dess, an antiquarian bookseller and specialist in movable books, says there are no movable books without image cutting. Here are some examples of books with Volvelle from the French National Library. A work of cosmography, the Calendarium calendar by Johannes Regiomontanus, a 15th century astronomer and mathematician. It is believed to be the first printed book to use string and Volvelle. It had its own printing works. It was at the very beginning of the invention of printing in 1450 that systems were conceived in books. At that time, of course, there was no question of books for young people. They were very learned and scientific books on astrology, anatomy, geography, and astronomy, dealing with the movement of the planets. One of the finest astronomical works of the 16th century, the Astronomicum Caesareum, in an imposing format and fully colored, with 3 Volvelle per plate. We leave the world of Volvelles with the first books using other systems, such as this work by Salomon de Causse, Practice and Demonstration of Solar Clocks. It includes 10 moving figures in relief and in 3 dimensions. The English were pioneers in the use of different systems. Here is geometry made easy, containing 10 plates and pre-cut figures. Here we have a unique system book for believers, Cut Confession, or the Easy Method for Preparing for Particular and General Confessions, by Christoph Leuter-Brouwer, first edition 1677. It contains 704 sins printed on tabs which are slipped under the right side margin. All you have to do is pull out of the margin the sins to be confessed. As soon as confession is over, all the sins are put back in the margin, so that no one can suspect the sins confessed. This clever system was widely reissued in the 17th and 18th centuries. In anatomy books, in particular, superimposed flaps with up to 15 layers are used to delve into the bowels of the human body, first in university works and then in books for young people. Here are 4 periods. Top left, a 1619 book by Johannes Remelinus, a German philosopher and anatomist from Ulm, printed in Augsburg. Below, a plate from 1873, and on the right, a famous German book, Platten's Healing Method. You noticed shortcomings that are morally reprehensible. Then on the left, the human body brought to life by David Pelham, and finally the human body by Joël Jolivet, with a beautiful contemporary graphic design in which men and women rediscover what belongs to them. Flaps can also be found in all the technical books from the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the early 20th century, as here in the modern mechanic which takes a car apart, or a locomotive. Animals are also entitled to this dissection. Here are cutting sheets to build, among other things, articulated puppets, which appeared in the 18th century and were popularized in the 19th century by Epinal's Imagery and other printers, as with this sheet for making jumbles. Moving figures or changing images with a pull tab, as seen here in the form of transforming images, were pioneers in the evolution of children's albums, somewhere between toys and books. The first movable pictures were produced around 1810, first in England, then in France and in German-speaking countries. Engravings and small books were produced with moving figures such as heads, hairdresses, hats and accessories that could be placed on different costumes. The terms cut-out figures, mobiles or moving sliding images were coined. Jacques Dess explains, for an illustration to be animated, it must first be detached from its support, extracted from its decorative background. European publishers vied with each other in creativity, creating new and attractive forms. Also very popular are the Lotto game cards, where the articulation of the arms hides the numbers announced. Here are the first books of children's literature in which we will find the very first animations. Very rare, the toy book by Jean-Pierre Bresse, distributed by the Giraud House in small quantities, of which here are extracts. Considered to be the first book with pull tabs, here placed in notches, making characters and scenery appear and disappear. Already in the years 1820, Legrand has published small books with delicate moving figures, such as Ernest and the Small Robinson. He edited remarkable mechanical children's books with hand watercolored plates animated by pull tabs that move several characters at once. Jacques Dess, specialist of this period, describes Legrand as an unknown in children's books and a pioneer of system books. Theo Gillen, a Dutch specialist in movable books, discovered a book dating from 1856 at an auction, the New Cavalry School. From the silhouettes and costumes, it could have originated in England, but it is the only copy known to date. On the initiative of the famous paper engineer Kees Morbeck, the most beautiful facsimile of an old animated book has been reissued in 100 copies as a tribute to Theo Gillen. The characters are riding animals. The front half of the animals' bodies and the top and bottom of the characters can be swapped using notches. A system that we find again in these copies of 4 figurines that I made from originals seen at Jacques Dess, origin unknown, in which 5 parts of the head can be exchanged and mixed. These last 2 examples give us a glimpse of the comic effect we will be seeing later in the Mishmash books. It was the Austrian publisher Müller in Vienna who produced the first relief book or theatre book, small scenes of human life, also known as diorama, illustrated by Leopold Chimany, pedagogue and author of children's books. The flaps lift with a ribbon. Aladdin or the Wonderful Lamp, French edition of an English album published by Dean & Son. 15 pages, 5 of which are system pages, each with 2 or 3 watercolor engravings. A thread is attached to the diorama by which it is pulled and held upright. Grand Theatre in Action, published by Capendu, French edition of a German book from the 1880s. Capendu was France's largest publisher of movable books in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The set stands upright thanks to an ingenious system of sturdy cardboard buttresses. Same principle with Quattro Grandi Teatri, It also exists in French. A Circus Party, printed in Germany and published in England, France and America. It uses a double system to straighten planes vertically. With this first communion souvenir card, exceptional for its size of 26 centimeters high, we have, as seen previously, a system that has been very widely used from the middle of the 19th century to the present day, namely a scene that the flap raises or lowers over a 90-degree angle. In other words, a base and a vertical background with a succession of planes. Meggendorfer's famous International Big Circus, a German artist we will talk about later. Doll's House by Lothar Meggendorfer. Flaps that are lifted to reveal a setting on several planes, like Francesca Crespi's A Walk Through Monet's Garden. And Four Feathers in Percy's Park by Nick Butterworth, paper engineer Andy Barron. Here again is our famous German artist Lothar Meggendorfer. He was a brilliant inventor of mechanical animation with over 200 children's books to his credit, including those with pull tabs animating several characters. He was also a cartoonist and caricaturist. The original albums date from the 1880s to the 1910s. The Great Theatre of Automata, a fairly realistic arm joint, can be seen. The Genius of Lothar Meggendorfer, produced as a tribute to Meggendorfer by David Pelham on design and Thor Logvik on paper engineering, with an animation on the cover. Animal Life of 1882 by Meggendorfer, from the collection of Larry Seidman. Here's a behind-the-scenes reproduction published for the 10th anniversary of the Movable Book Society that awards the Meggendorfer Prize every 2 years. The technical complexity is clear to see. We used to have metal dowels that rusted over the time and damaged the paper. Today we use plastic rivets. The Movable Mother Hubbard, produced by Dean & Son, a major London publisher behind various systems. There were printers and publishers. Fully Enfantine, 8 chromolithographs with living pictures. Nursery Rhymes with moving pictures, a new Dean Surprise book with pull tabs. The Golden Book, a very rare work by the short-lived Bavarian publisher Schaller and Kim, who published several system books during a short time between 1883 and 1885. Another exceptional book by the well-known French publisher Capendu. A Day at the Castle, an album of pictures with surprises. Printed by Dean and published by Capendu, these are threads that position the scene in relief when you open the pages by placing your fingers on the thumbs shown on either side of the page. The Pictureland by Raphael Tuck and Sons, publishes to the British royalty, panoramic chromolithography plates. Finally, Little Pets, panoramas of pictures to see inside, by Ernest Nister, 2 ribbons that are activated by turning the page to obtain Death on 2 planes. Here are images with transformation. A wheel metamorphoses into a star cut into 6 branches to magically make a second image appear. Nister edited in London a large number of lovely books idealizing the world of childhood. Transformation Pictures, the Schreiber publisher in Esslingen near Stuttgart, brought out some very fine albums and some books by Meggendorfer at the end of the 19th century. Only for Well-Behaved Children by Meggendorfer. Later, the American Julian Ware also created astonishing animated images using pools or tabs. Little Black Sambo, 2 animations per page. Choo Choo, the Little Locomotive, we go to 4 animations. The Cockerel, the Mouse and the Little Red Hen, 5 characters and scenery animated by a single wheel system. We go up a range with 7 animations per page in Animal Fair by Mateja and animated by Robert de Longchamp. And 9 animations in this alphabet book, again by Robert de Longchamp. The only contemporary book that moves even more characters, Knick Knack Paddywhack by Paul Zelinsky and paper engineering by Andrew Barron, who won in 2004 the Meggendorfer Prize. 10 figures, so 10 characters, it's quite remarkable. I don't know of any other book, ancient or modern, with so many independent animations only with one single tab. There are small almanacs on the Harlequinade theme with flaps that change the image according to the arrangement. Or this one in the form of a game program from a 1-act Turkish play at the Ambigu Comic Theatre. Although we are in the Age of Enlightenment, note the racism against the black man, still a curiosity at the time, who after the woman's gestural disgust becomes a white prince again. Ah, what a pleasure from black to white! No comment. And later we will also see this folding system known as accordion folding. A theatre of transformations by turning page strips. A highly original system available from Dean & Son in England and McLaughlin in the United States, published in France by Capendu. Here is a rare Meggendorfer curiosity with pages cut into 3 triangles. The same type of cutting but into 4 triangles a century later in this artist's book by Bernard Granger known as Blex Bolex, Oxo. Animal Lore and Disorder by James Riddle, which offers more than 200 walkie animals, not to mention improbable names. We stay on 2 strips with this famous surrealist Mishmash by Graham Oakley, still in print. This book sparked my curiosity about animated books and the beginning of my collection. Here we have 3 strips with this fabric mishmash, La Ménagerie Janus by Luc Maigret, French Library Collection. A 3-strip with Meggendorfer's The Funny Ant, reissued by its original publisher, Schreiber. A very tasty series on costumes by the German illustrator Walter Trier. There are 8,192 possibilities for costumed characters. Universal Bestiary by Javier Sáez Castan, published in Mexico, very successful graphically, reissued several times and still on sale. Phantasm, a 3-strip by Charles Burns. The Click-Clack Theatre by Eva Johanna Rubin, a 4-strip squared original. We move up market with this 5-strip in profile and face, Puzzle from Norman Messanger. Here we are at the maximum so far with this 17-strip book, 100,000 Billion Poems by Raymond Queneau, published in 1961 and reissued in 1994. The jumble lends itself very well to comic animal figurations. Pop-ups, which we will talk about later, are also used, such as Jurassic Jumble by Stephen Holmes. The Leporello, also known as an accordion book, is not strictly speaking an animation, but it enlivens space by unfolding a scene or landscape in perspective. Initially a simple folding for images that were too large in old books as for maps of geography, it has become a system in its own. On the Street by Meggendorfer. Very beautiful panoramas by Père Castor. Here the coastline. Also available are the river and the mountain. Then we will inlay a 3D set that comes to curl up in the folds of the accordion, as in Market Day by Maggie Bateson, set to volume by Herman Lilly. And On the Savannah by Dominique Reinhart, who achieves an inverted double accordion effect. A beautiful Leporello cutout, City Park by Meggendorfer, a lovely length of 3 meters 70. Which brings us to laser cutting in general, much used these days for its finesse, as in this modern Leporello, Eccentric City by Béatrice Coron. Two Leporello also very successful, Zebras by Anne Montbarbon and Alice in Wonderland by Sébastien Orsini. And finally, Sharp Noon by Rebecca d'Outremer, 100 laser-cut pages where you literally sink into the story from the inside of a living room to the harbor, crossing parks and the city. The cutouts are beautiful, real lace, but the pages are tricky to turn. Cut-out or perforated pages are also very common, as in this beautiful The Metamorphoses of the Void by cartoonist Maurice Henry, published in 1955 and reissued in 2018. Peep-shows were developed in the mid-18th century by Martin Engelbrecht in Augsburg, but they were originally wooden boxes with a string of finely colored cardboard cutouts. Paper peep-shows appeared almost at the same time in Vienna, London and Paris in the 1820s. Through 1 to 4 holes or lens, you can see a perspective in the inside of a monument, the enfilade of a parade, or any other event, like here a parade behind the Porte Saint-Denis in Paris from 1830. Here are 2 fine examples of books that unfold like peep-shows but without a viewing hole. You can see the set as a wall. More recent, The Disaster Tunnel by Edouard Gorey and the Charles Trenet CD box set, a French well-known singer, designed by Gérard Le Monaco, famous French paper engineer. End of the first part of our journey for those who want to take a break or freshen up. And our famous pop-up, when does it appear? Different verbs to express the opening of a double page spread from which a scenery emerges without further artifice: rise up, stand up, jump up, burst, to spurt out, etc., which have been grouped together under the more modern name of pop-up. Until now the pop-up was thought to have originated in the 1930s, but recent discoveries place it much earlier. Ernest Nister is said to have created the first pop-up with this Panasonic device in 1895, but curiously there was no follow-up in his numerous productions. Then the publisher Capendu published what is considered the first book with a pop-up, Les Étrennes de Bébé, an album of surprise images. I recreated the very simple opening system. In 1912, the first pop-up book was published in England, featuring characters that pop out of the book with the help of a rubber band. This is not yet the automatic double-page system, and you have to fold back the images into the book. The title Pop-up appeared again with the American publisher Blue Ribbon, all illustrated by Harold Lenz. As with antiquarian books, no paper engineer is mentioned. A magnificent Pinocchio in front of his alphabet book, and with the Geppetto inside the very imaginary whale, which is more reminiscent of a shark. color impressions like we no longer make today. Little Red Riding Hood, illustrated by Harold Lenz, but without the name of the paper engineer. Pop-up is mentioned as a registered trademark, but the publisher Blue Ribbon Press was not the inventor. Earlier, publisher Louis Giraud in England had already publications under the name The Daily Express Children's Annual, as early as 1929, with the subtitle All Colorful Pictures Unfold in Relief. Still without the name of the paper engineer, but we know that he had recruited Theodore Brown, who created all those self-unfolding paper wonders. The Beautiful Bucano Stories series replaced the Daily Expresses from 1934 to 1950, with pop-ups still created by Theodore Brown. Here is number 17, with a unique magical effect that is obtained with a light directed at the top of the house. A little fairy appears. With Pinocchio, Franconi filed a patent for his new system of opening between two pages of a book. Here we have two original systems, the jump-up story of Cinderella, an opening system that automatically straightens the figures. Nice idea of a hidden image in Sleeping Beauty by John Wallner. Here is one of the most famous contemporary movable book artists and one of my favorites, the Czech Wojciech Kubasta. He is surrounded here by two of his 12 very rare to find little books. Many of his stories were published mainly by the Prague publisher Artia and have been translated into 37 languages. More than 100 books to his credit. He was the illustrator and paper engineer. As Artia was unable to exceed its 5-year economic plan, Kubasta was never published in the United States except for 4 albums produced for Walt Disney in the 1970s, without his name being credited, following Disney's policy. Little Red Riding Hood, in around 10 books from its first editions, there was an animation on the cover, but this was not included in subsequent editions. A beautiful series entitled Top and Top, of which here are 2 examples. First at the farm, and the Tip and Top Sailors. Kubasta imagined a fan-shaped opening for his books, which can be seen clearly here. Their dog, Tap, often accompanies them on their adventures. Kubasta has created superb panascopics, some with text and others without, more reserved for festive decorations. Scenes unfolding between 2 cardboard covers from which emerge a pop-up, firstly the Indian camp, then the Santa Maria, ship of Christopher Columbus, finally this farm. More recent, The Village of Fairy Tales, produced by Intervisual Book Studio. Another system with characters and settings drawn flat on a sheet, then cut out to be folded vertically, as in this pretty little German book, Four Tales, with a very delicate drawing. The same cutting system is used here with a famous 50s series from Mulhouse publisher Lucos. These books have never been exported, it is a completely French production for that time. All are cut and straightened engravings which immediately provide depth of field. No date is mentioned on these books except one, that on Lourdes, thanks to the imprimatur granted by the bishopric of Strasbourg in 1958. We have a real curiosity here. The 17 Catechism books published by the Salesian Catholic Church of Hong Kong between 1957 and 1964 by Reverend Mario Correrizza. Each book contains 20 paintings with figurine and decorations added in front of a background. Sometimes with flaps or wire zippers, they were published in 6 languages: French, English, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese and Chinese. Of the 340 scenes in total, you can find some tasty ones. Here it is written, "The one and true church which speaks the truth." So the only church that teaches you that 2 + 2 = 4. The Chinese probably already had an idea. A lovely series by Czech artist Rudolf Lucas, who was a film decorator in the 1940s before becoming interested, as they said, in space images in books. If it was indeed the Czech publisher Artia who published these books, it was for foreigners and not for Czech readers. He used a system of the tab between the 2 pages which pulls the image to highlight it. But we have also pop-ups which very simply use the space between 2 pages, with Bomba's Adventure by Seda and Pavlin, 2 wonderful Czech artists. The new golden age of pop-ups stretched from the 1960s to the 1990s and were almost all produced by the American studio Graphics International, which became Intervisual Books in 1975 in Los Angeles, created by Waldo Hunt, nicknamed the King of Pop-ups. It was Waldo Hunt's discovery of Czech artist Kubasta's books that made him the most important producer and innovator of pop-up books. More than 1,000 books to his credit. The majority of books from this period were made and printed in Colombia, in Cali by Carvajal. Many were published by Hallmark, including Pienkowski's famous Haunted House, brought to volume by Thor Logvik, a hit still today. Hunt was awarded the only Meggendorfer Prize in 2000 for ushering in the second golden age of pop-up books. Monster Island, illustrated by Ron van der Meer, but the paper engineers are Thor Logvik and John Strajon, while van der Meer is himself a great paper engineer. And here precisely is a beautiful architecture with text by Diane Tsujic from Ron van der Meer's studio. With Tarzan, we must mention Ib Pennick, Danish by origin, who was recognized as the most creative paper engineer in the resurgence of pop-ups from the 60s to the 80s. He has filled several patents for pop-up manufacturing techniques and has designed over 130 books. The magnificent educational series on animals' life from National Geographic between 1986 and 1995, among the last to be printed in Colombia. It re-energized the rise of the animated book and its popularity. 3 great paper engineers recruited by Waldo Hunt ensured the international success of these books: Thor Logvik, but especially James Roger Diaz and John Strajon. The artist David Carter has created a beautiful and innovative series which takes us out of the world of stories to project us into an abstract sculptural universe, like here One Red Dot, for which he was awarded the Meggendorfer Prize in 2006, and 600 Black Spots. Another amazing series of 15 little books, Mini Pops, by designer Kimika Warabe, brought to volume by Koichi Saito, a Bible for novice paper engineers where the wealth of systems are packed into such a small 9 cm by 8 cm space. David Pelham's Trail uses celluloid to give the illusion of 2 butterflies in freedom. A pop-up in a white model is often more poetic when it's not overloaded with colors. And here's another system, the Carousel, whose covers meet back-to-back attached by a ribbon to form a story in a succession of settings without beginning nor end, composed of scenes cut on 2 or 3 planes in a triangular perspective. A very successful Beauty and the Beast by Roland Pym. It was at the beginning of the 1950s that Folding Book published in London at least 7 small carousels. 2 very beautiful carousels. On the left, Blue Lagoon by Philippe Huget, and on the right, an artist's carousel, Space Opera, handmade in 50 copies in 2016 by Claire Andlauer and Tristan Perreton. A spectacular opening with my pirate ship by Steve Cox and paper engineering by Nick Denchfield. The pop-up image no longer just wants to pop upwards, it's going to want to take to the air by escaping from the sides of the book. First in small ways, with this wolf in a bad way in Little Red Riding Hood by Marjorie Priceman, animated by Bruce Foster. In Keys Mosley's Planes, a plane seems to detach itself from the book to fly around it. The pop-up takes up space on either side with its warship in ships, paper engineered by David Howcock. Or by leaving the book as in China pop-up by Kit Low, talented paper engineer from Hong Kong. The wall of China unfolds over 80 centimeters. And the Forbidden City, stretching out to a full 2 meters 80 by Wong Wei, a major Chinese paper engineer. This book received the Meggendorfer Prize in 2021. An advance towards the viewer, beautiful animation invented by Sabuda that always surprises the reader, with this group from the Chronicles of Narnia by the same Sabuda. The pop-up will also explode out of the book How to Find the Flower Fairies by Mary Barker, put in volume by Richard Ferguson. The famous arc of playing cards in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. On the left, that of James Roger Diaz, composed on a flat surface in accordion, and on the right, that of Robert Sabuda with cards which twill in all directions. And finally, this beautiful explosion from Philippe Huget in Robopop, handmade artist's book, screen printed in 120 copies. The Americans Robert Sabuda and Matthew Reinhart are the magicians of contemporary movable books with an unimaginable complexity of folding of which they have become masters. After Meggendorfer and Kubasta, they are the most prolific and inventive paper engineers in terms of their numerous productions. Engineers is in their case very appropriate. In addition to paper and cardboard, we find other materials in the 3D rendering of images, such for example tissues paper with this magnificent dragon in Monsters and Dragons by Sabuda and Reinhart. Very beautiful metallic texture with iridescent effect in The Wizard of Oz by Sabuda. He was awarded the Meggendorfer Prize in 2002. A big trend these days, making the pop-up that will emerge the highest. A feat each time called into question. Here are examples. The Jungle Book by Reinhart, even higher with Transformers by Reinhart, cartoon franchise with an immense robot which was awarded the Meggendorfer Prize in 2014. The Dragon and the Knight by Sabuda. But it was in his book Lego that Reinhart achieved the highest elevation to date, obtained only, I remind you, just by opening the book. Finally, this Tower of Babel in Genesis by Chuck Fisher, put in volume by Bruce Foster, another great American paper engineer. I would like to point out that Bruce Foster has taken over as director of the Movable Stationery, the quarterly newsletter of the Movable Book Society. The opposite of highest, go lowest, with this cascading flood and a great opening idea in Brava Strega Nonna by Sabuda and Reinhart. Reinhart specializes in the operation of numerous franchises, stimulating him to invent amazing new systems every time, and giving him each time the opportunity to exuberance astonishing systems and offer him the possibility to show all his know-how. He can make more than 25 attempts for each pop-up in order to ensure that all the highly complex folds fit together without telescoping during opening or closing, a real challenge. With this truck in Transformers, he achieves a spectacular double image going from truck to robot with a single pull. And in Jurassic World, two dinosaurs astonishingly complex and so alive. Here's an example with Game of Thrones, where the book is spread over a large area with the first and back covers separating. In this case, the book can still be manipulated and its opening understandable. While still from the same Reinhart, we arrive with this Diagon Alley taken from Harry Potter at a borderline complexity. Do you also have to become an engineer to understand the opening of this game book full of tabs? Too many constrained and tight folds which do not offer the paper the possibility of unfolding freely. How many times will this book be opened? But now it's the designer Simon Arispe who's dazzling us with his books. Trained by Matthew Reinhart, he too has a knack for spectacular pop-ups with this magnificent The Seven Trials of Rostam. In 2018, he was awarded the Meggendorfer Prize for The Legend of the Snakes King Zak, also based on the Persian legend. A magnificent mechanical use of the famous double scenery achieved with a single pull, a system invented by Reinhart. But I also like the poetic simplicity of If I Were a Polar Bear, written, illustrated and designed by the American multimedia poet John Rives, and the superb Leaves by the wonderful Japanese artist Katsumi Komagata, a tactile edition for the blind. If Columbia was the main printer from the 1960s to the 1990s, it was China which took over with other Asian countries by offering publishers competitive manufacturing prices thanks to a large workforce. Here is a 3-minute extract from a report produced by Sabuda in the Thai workshop which produced the joint book with Reinhart on dinosaurs. After printing the images, we prepare a rigid foam plate for inserting the stamping parts. Manufacture of metal stamping parts for each element of the sheet. The sheets are pre-cut. We tear off the excess paper to a good thickness around the sheets. Very physical work. Finally, we remove all unnecessary paper from each image and unblock the holes. Then begins the assembly and gluing. You notice that the table only takes care of the elements of one double page, and always the same. Each worker is assigned to the same glue or assembly points. We can't imagine a robot doing this work. Well, not yet. As the publishers point out, each dot of glue has a cost, so these books are more and more expensive to manufacture. Sabuda informs us that 25,000 books can be printed in 1 week and that there are workshops in China with 3,000 employees. The double page goes around the table, passing from hand to hand. In the end, all the double pages are brought together to be glued into the cover, symbolically shown here. But China is no longer content with manufacturing books produced abroad. There are now amazing local paper engineers designing extravagant books whose main subjects are the legendary epics and great historical battles of the Chinese dynasties. One can't help but think of the imprint left by Sabuda and Reinhart, whose folding and animation systems strongly influenced Chinese artists. Here are the only systems that make a scene move, where there are no cut-out images such as in the Motograph moving picture book, giving moiré effects where a sheet of rigid celluloid on which very fine horizontal black lines are engraved is slit over the engraving to add movement to certain printed lines in the image. In this image, the effect of fire and water is striking. With Ombro Cinema, movement appears like a cartoon. Here is the simplest example. In this case, the image and the colors are clearly visible since the transparent and black lines are equal in width. The equality can only give two moves. It is therefore our eye and our brain which will fill the gaps. Another more recent example with Gallop by Rufus Butler Seder, first book in a series published from 2007. More fluidity, the image is composed of 6 movements. Beyond that, the image would no longer be visible because of the excessive width of the black lines necessary to hide the phases of the movement. Turning the pages animates the image by pulling on the transparency. There is more magic here, the most sophisticated example in this book by Japanese Takahiro Kurayama, entirely produced on a computer. This gives totally unexpected effects. Another style of animation with Safari, designed by Dan Kanen, using the lenticular principle like postcards or other advertisements. More fluidity in the movement towards cinema, but the image is not very sharp. We cannot talk about animated images on paper without mentioning the famous flipbooks. You find them of all sizes, and the graphic and photographic repertoire is endless. Englishman John Barnes Linnet is credited with the first patent for a flipbook in 1868. They were simply moving images 27 years before the Lumiere brothers invented photographic cinema in 1895. Small pocket cinemas that you hold with your fingertips while flicking with your thumb. In German and English, we actually say thumb cinema. The Talking Picture Book of 1885, of German origin, was a book without animations where cords were pulled which activated bellows and made animals or other sounds. Then in the 20th century, real sound arrived in books thanks to a small memory card. At first, small button batteries buried in the cover did the trick, but once exhausted, it was impossible to change them without destroying the book. Then appeared a small plastic hatch for changing the batteries, and finally, but still very rare, a housing for normal stick batteries, giving the sound book eternal life. Thanks to LEDs, light has appeared for more spectacular effects. Or by combining the two, as in this Chinese book, illuminated cover and music inside. Here is an American book using these stick batteries. Birdscape, about birdsong. First stereo book with 2 speakers and ingenious cutout to pass the sound through the pages. The creation of movable books in France will remain very marginal in the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, to the point of becoming today an important and copious production, thanks to a world promotion of artists and paper engineers, more imaginative and more creative, graphically speaking. A fine innovation in The Secret of Galleries by Cécile Jacou, with 5 dioramas on 8 levels each, with a total book thickness of 1 They are also available in handmade artists' books in a few copies for collectors. Here are some examples. Philippe Huget, who has made remarkable screen-printed books, here with Record Man on sport. A superb book by Ivan Sieg, Livre obscène, a play on words on obscenity. Talented designer, unfortunately his only animated book. An Eye for an Eye by Cyril Buffet and Antoine Paris, unique copy. Totems in My Head by Mathilde Bourgon, containing 9 pop-ups in 10 copies, and you see at the bottom its commercial version from 2016 but containing only 6 pop-ups. The Tower of Horrors by Nicolas Caudron and his superb artist book Calligramme. Number by Camille Renaud, made entirely with wire and cord. Butterflies by Camille Magot, a 3-sided Leporello in 8 copies. Labyrinth by Bernard Duisit in 15 copies. Stairs unfold between 2 covers. Marion Bataille, who was awarded the Meggendorfer Prize in 2010 for her very successful and inventive abécédaire Op-Up, made in 30 copies, and who had the opportunity to have it published under the title ABC 3D. Unfortunately, it is impossible for me to mention all the artists. We have met others along the way, but their beautiful books are fortunately available in many bookstores. Finally, I would not like to leave aside the great novelty for a movable book, Augmented Reality, as in this book from the company Claire M. and Adrien B. for Claire Burden and Adrien Mondo, Aqua Alta, The Crossing of the Mirror, put into volume by Eric Singelin, young paper engineer, inspired by their video work on stage. An application in a digital tablet accompanied by music brings the 3D decor to life with animations that can be viewed from all angles, turning around or seen from above. For practical reasons, this is the book that I rotate, but when you use the tablet, you can almost put yourself at the level of the characters and follow them, but you always have to be directed towards the book. Very nice wave effect with the pages. Perhaps one day we will see in the great epic of animated books moving images or photos, as in the Wizard's Gazette, the newspaper of Harry Potter's magical world. We have almost reached the end of our journey with more than 200 movable books, system books or transformation books. Now you have an idea of what can be animated in a book. The choice was difficult to approach the different facets of this printed paper object. There are so many other albums and artists for you to discover, but fortunately their creations can be seen in a few rare exhibitions. Despite the computer technology of augmented reality and future inventions, the magic of paper folding and animation, full of poetry, will always be my preference. I will leave you to wander in this imaginary space. I hope I have aroused your interest in this magical world, which, as they say, has delighted children and especially adults for so long. Thank you for listening to me.